All right, so this company is mixing the present and future of the delivery industry by building unique patented drone ports that provide the missing piece of the drone delivery market and are getting us closer to the efficient last inch of the last mile of this industry. Let me introduce Valqari. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Builder Nation. Today, we are joined by Ryan Walsh, founder and CEO at Valqari. Welcome, Ryan. Thank you very much for being here with us today. Could you please introduce yourself a little bit?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm Ryan Walsh. I'm the CEO and founder of Valqari. Been working on our technology for the last 10 years, and it's been really exciting to see where the drone, and particularly the drone delivery market, has evolved into and where it's going. So really excited to talk about it with you and your audience.
Thank you very much, Brian. Actually, before we started recording this, just a little quick talk. You mentioned that this is far more interesting and far more exciting than, for example, doing some sales. Not to be a little sassy with our salespeople, but I noticed that you served at the 75th Ranger Regiment, right? So what sparked that interest in drone delivery? Maybe it was while you were there, maybe while you finished serving. What sparked that interest, that excitement in this industry?
Yeah, one of the lucky things about being in a cutting edge unit like the 75th Ranger Regiment is you get access to all the latest technologies and toys the military has. And so we would go on missions, and this is way back in 2004, 2005, but we were going on missions, and we had Predator drone assets providing overhead camera, right? And then eventually it became, all the way into Reaper drones and gunships. And so just seeing that development over the years, it really kind of stayed with me. I didn't immediately get out and see drones right on the forefront. I had left the military and went and used my degrees, which I got my undergrad in economics and then my MBA. But that combination of studying particularly the industrial revolutions, the first three, and now we're heading into this fourth one, and seeing drones, it kind of clicked for me in 2013. And so my co-inventor and I, we really dove in and started looking at how is this going to play into everyday society? And that's what led us to building our drone ports and into commercializing all of this. So, the military is kind of where that drone seed was originally planted, but by all means, it took a much better understanding of kind of where the world and the economy and everything else was at before it all kind of came together.
Right. Well, that's actually pretty cool. Thank you very much for showing us that. Actually, I did read a Forbes interview that you were featured in recently, right? Where they spoke about you. I did read that precisely it is during that time that you started working with drones during your time serving that that was where it was sparked. But however, more specifically talking about the drone landing station, which is pretty much your star product, right? Your start patented manufacturing thing. How was that idea born? Specifically, how did you mold it into becoming what it is today?
Yeah, so great question. Once we made the connection that drones are happening, it's for sure, right? I mean, military technology always leads 2 decades before the commercial world most of the time. And so we already made that jump. Drones are happening. But what we realized after our initial research is the first remote controlled aircraft patent was filed by Nikola Tesla in like 1898. So these aren't new. And we found that anything that we were going to be able to get a controlling market share of was going to be very difficult on the drone side. And so we really started poking holes and diving into our ideas and going, do we want to go up against the Boeings and the Amazons of the world to spend millions of dollars to try and get a few more pounds of payload or a few more miles an hour in flight? And it just seemed like a very kind of uphill and almost not even viable battle, right? I mean, 2 guys starting in their garage going up against Amazon, in the same exact weight category and the same exact thing. I mean, that's crazy. So we started looking at how do we turn this whole thing on its head? And if you remember the original Amazon video, the mom is holding her daughter's hand and they're in their perfectly manicured backyard with a nice fence around it. And this Amazon drone comes and lands in their yard. And I remember looking at my co-inventor, Alex, and I said, my neighborhood got dolls and kids and cars and everything else there. There's no way that this is going to work, let alone in the city of Chicago or somewhere else. How does this actually play out? And that's really where we had that breakthrough moment of how do customers actually get packages from drones, right? I mean, you have this robot with 8 spinning blades, right? They're going, crazy speeds and they'll cut you open, right? So the last thing in the world you want is a drone and a human to be in the same place at the same time ever. So we figured building a landing station is the key offset in that chain that allows the drone to drop that package. It's not left on the ground. It's secured. It's not in the middle of the backyard or the street. And at the same time, you don't have to have a human there to get it. So that was what really led us down that path. And a lot of refinement. We started with mailboxes, single family home mailboxes, and it ended up being way too early. It was 2017, and people weren't getting deliveries to their home anywhere close to then. So a lot of refinement, a lot of customer development, but we ended up with our 6 locker system, and that's what we're moving around the world right now.
Oh, that's amazing. So it seems like this was sort of started sort of as a David versus Goliath kind of thing, not wanting to go against Amazon and these big industries. Now you also mentioned something really cool, which is that you were ahead of your time back in 2017 with deliveries for households, right?
Yep.
And I noticed that right now you're mainly working with the golf courses, stadiums, and campus deliveries. How did this come to happen?
So we realized a lot in that initial testing that at-home deliveries were still quite a bit of ways, a lot of that being regulatory, not necessarily anything on the technology side. And so how do you make money, right? I mean, as a business, the goal is being self-sustaining and making money. And so we looked at the regulations, and line of sight deliveries are really all that's allowed until they change to the new deliveries. And so looking at that, what are the commercial applications today? And so golf courses was a big one, realizing that they're having an issue with labor. Golfers always complain they never see the beverage cart often enough, and there's enough margin in there with what you would tip a cart girl that it pays for the drone delivery itself without any extra cost to the customer. And so that opened up a few doors for us looking at that. We partnered with Levy Restaurants and Compass Group, which we launched our first operation together last year. And it kind of opened the door to all of these short range delivery opportunities that are available today. And so that's how we got into the campuses and the stadiums and the golf courses.
Right. So essentially it was just this main commercial thing. That's actually pretty cool. Thank you very much for that. Now, before we move into something a little different, I want to dive actually a little deeper into the actual drone delivery station. Okay, on that actual little tower that you built. How does it work?
So it's the hardware is definitely one piece of it. It's a very critical piece of it, but I like to think that the platform underneath is a much bigger piece of the action. It's the more impressive piece to me. And so customer places an order through an app. We can do it through a Valqari facing app, or we can do it through a customer facing app. But they place that order and it pings the POS system at a golf course or a stadium or whatever. And so they're preparing that food, and it also lets the drone pilot know, get your drone on top of the closest landing station. So when that food is ready, they take it out of the kitchen, put it in the landing station. The back end of that app has already reserved the locker. It's already queued the whole thing up. It's already pre-checked the flight path. So when that food gets loaded up, gets taken over the receiving station, notifications get sent. So it's really more of a hardware enabled platform than just a landing station itself.
Wow. Actually, I mean, I did have that idea that it was merely that landing station. That's really cool. That's actually super cool. Now, I actually want to dive a little deeper. I remember that I was watching the video that you launched approximately like a month ago where you feature some of the capabilities and some of the features. One of those is that it is airframe agnostic.
Yep.
What does that mean?
So we have a set of proprietary bars on top. We've been working on it for quite some time. What it allows for is any airframe that lands on the top of our landing station or a package that's winched or hover dropped on, those bars can close exactly to the size of that box or that drone. And so it doesn't matter what drone it is or what package it is, we're able to meet the needs of that delivery. And so the key was not to get into a specific size package or a specific drone in one airframe only, right? Because it's not convenient for the customer. So it's always about being the lowest friction point in the entire chain.
Wow, that's actually pretty clever. So that means that you don't have any sort of specific, I don't know, like partnership with a drone manufacturer or something. You just simply let everybody decide.
Well, we partner with several. We pre-integrate a lot of airframes. And so when customers come to us, if they're, like Levy Restaurants or Encompass Group, and they go, look, we have this operation and we're not drone pilots, we're not engineers, provide a whole solution. We're able to give them a complete off-the-shelf end-to-end solution.
Oh, all right. That's actually better. Thank you very much for sharing that. Now, let's jump off the Valqari ship a little bit and talk a little bit more about you specifically, Ryan, because I have to say, I was jealous of your LinkedIn profile. Like you have so many achievements that you have been, you have won both as a leader and as a startup in general, that you have been a finalist, semi-finalist. It's just honestly amazing, and congratulations on all of those. But out of these plenty of awards, you have to have, which recognition stands out the most to you? Which is your favorite?
So my old squad leader used to make a comment. My platoon was notorious for not giving out medals. They always used to say, do you need something that tells you you did your job? And so the awards, in my opinion, they're great and they're recognition, but I tend to not try and necessarily get high on our own supply, right? I don't buy into our own hype. Really, the first patents being granted were the biggest accomplishment for me. 10 years ago, right? I mean, I threw my life savings at these patents and took a very broad shot at us being first in a huge part of the world. If we were wrong, I was out all of my money I'd worked for my whole life in several years, right? And so putting that on the line and kind of just going all in on it and it being successful was kind of, that meant more to me than anything else.
That's really admirable, Ryan. Thank you very much for sharing that. So going back into these packaging stations, which honestly I want to talk about them all day. They're super cool. They're really cool. You mentioned that around 10 years ago, you pretty much verted all of your savings into this. How long did it actually take to build the first functional landing, from software and hardware wise?
Functional, I guess, is a relative term, right? So we did a lot of testing from 2013 to 2017. Nothing I would call anything close to an MVP. In 2017 is when we started building our first MVPs. We originally designed it off of a single family home mailbox. And, we figured if you're putting this in front of the house and it's got to be aesthetically pleasing and all this, but we realized that was a very probably amateur set of requirements. It just didn't solve the problems we were looking to solve, and it might have been solving the wrong problems, worrying about aesthetics over function, things like that. And so we had a working prototype for the landing station itself, but it didn't really work for the drone. It was too narrow on top. It didn't center the drone, so you couldn't work with different footprints and different methods. The drone had to have all of the precision and accuracy, which is a very unrealistic expectation. And so we went through and did several generations of that. And then we evolved into the next version of landing station, which we did the first ever 5G delivery or 5G drone delivery on Sprint's network when they launched it in 2019, which was a really cool accomplishment. But again, we didn't necessarily solve a lot of the key drivers. It was still too much of a mailbox. And so that original and that second version were receive only. They weren't airframe agnostic. They weren't anywhere close to as functional. And so we worked with a few different drone partners, and they gave us feedback. They said, we need to be able to send and receive. We have a few different drones in our fleet. Can you work with them? And so that built this new set of requirements that got us to this point where now we're building our 6-locker drone port that sends and receives and works with any drone station. So those iterations were very valuable and very necessary, but it was 5 years from our first prototype to where we are now.
Wow, I mean, that talk about R&D, right? That's super cool as well. And how did you first bring, or how was the first original pitch that you made to an actual customer? How was that first sale?
It's kind of going back to some of my previous experience, but you always have to speak to their problems, not to your solutions. And so, it started with a lot of finding people that believed in the vision, people that were working towards a common goal that were complementary to us, and just finding like minds. The drone market, especially, you see the guys like Amazon that tried to do it all by themselves. Most of them fell on their face. There's very few that are able to do it on their own. It's just too big of a problem set. And so finding the right group to work with, or groups to work with, was a very critical step. But then going through the kind of just the evolution of the industry and kind of how it all shapes together, it was a lot of trial and error. To kind of get to the various iterations that kind of led us to this point.
Right. I mean, in the end, it is sort of kicking stone, as they call it, right? It's been definitely a journey, and I really admire that. But actually, I want to ask you about some of the most recent news that I was able to find on Valqari, and that is a partnership that you had with the BWA. Essentially, this was, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a partnership that is bringing drone manufacturing and training. It's a program for Guam. Please tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so we've BWA, or Bella Wings Aviation. They're a longtime partner of ours. They actually bought our first ever drone delivery station. And so we shipped that to Guam many years ago, and they were one of the key teams providing that critical feedback for building the revisions to where we are now. And so after working with them and going through a lot of the back and forth, what we realized is manufacturing in North America and shipping to Guam or the South Pacific was very expensive. It added almost 50% to the price. And so we started analyzing, how do we solve these problems more cost effectively? I mean, like most places, they're not sitting on a pile of extra cash that they can just throw at brand new technology, and so showing them how it was an evolution, and by them I mean the governments of Guam and Mariana Islands and Palau, really demonstrating how it was a huge step forward versus what they have now, and not really a new technology, but more of a disruptive evolution, was really kind of that key selling point and speaking to their needs. And so kind of going back to your last question, it's figuring out how you actually save them money, provide that value, beat what they're currently doing. And so it made sense to license our technology to Bella Wings, and they can manufacture on Saipan, which is the capital island of the Marianas, and they would be able to provide that hub. And so it was much easier for us to extend our footprint. It gives us a much quicker ramp time. As a startup, it's always a concern of overexerting yourself or spreading yourself too thin, and this strategy really mitigates that. And so being able to provide real value, giving medical access to people in these remote islands that normally don't have it. It's a big step up over, convenient hot dog delivery at a stadium, for instance. And so we're really excited about how this is going to impact lives. But it's about solving problems.
Yes, I totally agree about solving problems. Now, actually, I wanted to jump into a more of a general question that I believe, I mean, you addressed this on the website. However, I believe that it's worth asking. All of these deliveries, all of these drones, they can be a little bit of people can be a little reluctant about them, right? How can people be assured that their packages are going to be safe, are going to be delivered on time, theft free? How does that work?
So I actually was an external expert on the recent CANADAC board, which is the Canadian Drone Advisory Committee, working with Transport Canada. And we also saw a lot of this when we were doing our first deployments in Scottsdale, Arizona at Sun City Country Club. At the country club, for instance, it's an over 55 community. We figured these are not going to be the people that are embracing drone delivery. And all of those concerns, right? Privacy, is this dangerous? All of this. And what we found was education was really the key piece there. So meeting with all the golfers before we kicked it off and said, look, we're going to be able to bring you your beers and your hot dogs faster. And it's going to provide a new level of convenience and service for you. We're not capturing any data. We're not taking pictures of you. We're just simply bringing you your drinks faster. And people really understood that. Once you just kind of clued them in and said, this is what's going on, here's what we're doing, and there was a clear level of transparency, people were much more on board. And we found the same thing with the CANADAC board. It's really kind of unwinding a lot of the misconceptions people have. For 20 years, all you ever saw about drones was they're used in missile strikes in the Middle East, right? I mean, it was a military tool for the longest time, and that's all people associated it with. And so there was always privacy concerns, always danger concerns. But once you educate people and let them know this is how we're solving problems for you, they end up being much more embracing, much more welcoming of the technology. And we even saw a recent study, 90% of people are welcoming drone technology. So I think that it's just like anything else, getting people to understand it.
Well, that's great. The fact that you've been educating people, not because it doesn't only help you, but also helps the industry to move forward, which I believe is great. Now, going back into the business part of all this, I mean, you're the CEO of this startup. You have an MBA. You also have experience in supply chain and logistics, for what I was able to see on your LinkedIn profile. How do you make sure to keep everything balanced, from procurement to supply chain to operations to everything else? How do you do it?
I mean, I think by nature, startups are unbalanced. It's almost hard to be a startup and be balanced. If you've got that balance, you're much more so on course to be a, fully fledged self-sustaining company, right? Startups by nature are trying to find that product market fit and trying to find that nascent market. And so it's tough. You have to put all in, which means you're going to be unbalanced in your personal life. I don't know any early stage founders that have a balanced life themselves. And that ends up providing a bit of balance to the company because you've got more time to oversee things. But you're always running into, if you're doing great on sales, especially in a hardware company, that means you're struggling on manufacturing and distribution. If you're struggling on capital or whatever in these past few years have shown with COVID and the downturn and everything else, Silicon Valley Bank, that capital is not something you should take for granted. And so having a good cash flow management plan and having a good resiliency plan is critical. And so finding these ways to find the balance, or I guess at least the foundation and structure that will get you to that balanced company is really important. But I would probably be the worst person in the world to talk about balance in my own life and in the company. It feels like you're constantly sticking your finger in the next loop. So I just don't know that balance and startups are necessarily synonymous.
Well, I definitely did not expect not that unbalance being so good, but I think it's great. Thank you very much for sharing that. Now you just mentioned that you always poking your finger sort of in the next thing, right? Um, do you have in plans some sort of continue expanding, continue, for example, licensing your products as you did with the BWA, sorry. Are there any other plans on that?
Yeah, we recently were finalizing an acquisition of a company in the UK that had a competing but complementary product. So we're working on establishing that footprint in the UK and European market. We are in discussions for a number of locations in Africa and the Middle East for licensing. You know, we're always looking for licensing partners in markets that we don't have any preliminary plans to go into, logistics or market-based or cultural or whatever it may be. It's oftentimes better to have somebody that is local, that's kind of that point of contact and overseeing everything. So yeah, we feel very good about kind of this hybrid strategy that we're approaching, where we're working with licensing partners, we're doing some of the operations ourselves, and we're also doing some channel partnerships.
Wow, that's actually amazing. I really can't wait to see how those partnerships have evolved in Africa and in the UK. That's super exciting. Now, before we close this out, because I definitely want to know about something, which is, I mean, I saw that you have battery backup and solar charging in the cooks, right? When can we expect to hear more about that?
So we actually are making pretty amazing strides in both of those areas. I'm really excited about them, and we didn't want to release those products too early, which is why they're a little bit past our preliminary timelines. But especially when you're dealing with electricity and because we are working with third-party drone providers, the last thing we want to do is fry one of their drones. So we put a lot more rigorous testing in, which has extended those timelines a little bit. But I would expect before the end of the year that we debut those. We have more remote populations like in Guam and Palau in the Mariana Islands, where there's not always a good power grid available. And so being able to give them a means of putting this technology in the remote areas where you need it, without needing an existing infrastructure, adds a whole new layer to the capabilities, whether it's remote deliveries, emergency response, disaster relief, whatever it may be. So I'm very excited about the progress we made, and I think that we're a few months from debuting it.
Wow, that is amazing. I honestly didn't expect to hear it was going to be so soon. That's great. I'm really happy and really excited to see that going live. Now, before we close this out, Ryan, you have an amazing experience. You have quite the journey. So I believe this is going to be very, very valuable to everybody listening. What advice would you give to any young entrepreneurs, engineers, and just any youngsters that might be listening to one that are starting their own journey in this industry?
So I would say the best advice I can give is knowing how to discern the difference. So I'm probably my harshest critic. So when I hear critical feedback, I take it more seriously than anybody. If it's good, valid criticism that an area I can improve, I take it to heart and I really work on it. At the same time, everybody's a critic and everybody's got an opinion, and you'll hear conflicting opinions every other meeting throughout the day. So being stubborn enough to know, no, I've done my math, I've done my calculations, my assessment is correct, I'm going to put it all on the line and get there. That's a virtue in itself, but also knowing that ego is going to be the downfall if you let it, and that pride will get you. And going back to not getting high on your own supply, being critical of yourself and being the most critical of yourself is really how you kind of avoid that ego pitfall. And so it's finding that balance, or finding that ability to discern between good and bad criticism, that kind of hones your messaging, your ability as an entrepreneur, your idea, your business, everything.
Right. Well, that's actually a really good advice. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And well, just thank you very much, Ryan, for being here with us today, sharing your experience, sharing your thoughts. Where can we find you? Where can we find Valqari? On any social media handles?
Yeah, check us out at Valqari.com. If you look on all the major socials, just search Valqari, VALQ. Okay. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Always welcoming new connections and new people in my network. So feel free to reach out, message us. Happy to discuss how we might be able to collaborate and work together.
Thank you very much, Ryan. I do recommend checking out your website. Specifically, your technology is amazing. I really liked it. Thank you very much. Remember, guys, that you can also find more information, interesting articles, interesting interviews directly on our website, controlhub.com/builder-nation. We're going to love to hear from you. Thank you very much for being part of this community. And we're going to see you the next episode. Again, Ryan, thank you very much for joining us. We were so lucky to have you.
Thank you so much, Sam. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.
When building the future is your priority, tedious procurement processes should be last on your list. The problem is that purchasing data is scattered across spreadsheets, receipts, emails, and messages. Tracking it all sucks and makes it easy to commit mistakes. Introducing the ControlHub way, the all-in-one purchasing software for hardware companies. Buying parts, services, or office supplies? Submit a quick purchase request to buy from your list of approved vendors, or buy from a new provider. Buying from approved vendors is even easier. Import your shopping cart directly into your purchase request using our checkout integrations. When the order is ready, submit it for approval. We'll ping all pre-designated approvers both via ControlHub's website, email, and Slack notifications for a faster turnaround. If you need a PO, we got you. Generate it in one click. Online purchase? Boom, virtual card. Do an automatic 3-way match, pay invoices, and sync everything live with QuickBooks or NetSuite. Purchasing just got a lot easier. ControlHub. Get back to building.